Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. This is a woman chess grandmaster Atousa, and today I want to analyze a very interesting game for you guys. This game was played by the former world champion Mikhail Tal, the legendary Mikhail Tal, and he was famous for his tactical abilities and sacrifices and tactical positions. So he was a really talented and strong player. And this game was played in 1981. The name of the tournament was Lvov International. And at the end of this tournament, Mikhail Tal got shared first place with Romanishin, who's another strong chess player of that time. And I want to analyze one of his games in this position. So let's dive into it. So as you can see, Mikhail Tal is playing as white and his opponent is Meduna Edward. So Mikhail Tal started with e4, my favorite move. Black played c6. And here white played d4, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, and c4. So the name of this defense is Caro-Kann defense, and after c4 we have pawn of variation. Black played knight f6, knight c3, e6, knight f3, bishop e7, cd5, ed5, bishop b5 check, knight c6, knight e5, bishop d7, castle, castle, rook e1. Black played bishop b4, bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4. Notice that whenever we have a pin, we don't want to get rid of the pin, so black wants white to take here, but white usually wants to keep the pin because notice that the knight can't move since the queen on d8 will be captured. So black played queen d6 to unpin the knight, queen b3. Now this queen is kind of overloaded, and here black played bishop a5. But let's say if black plays something like rook e8, white can capture the knight on f6, and now if g takes f6, black's pawn structure can get destroyed. And if queen takes f6, we can take the bishop on b4. That's why earlier I mentioned that this queen is overloaded. It means that the queen is protecting more than one piece at the same time. So in the game, black played bishop a5, and here white played rook e3, bishop takes c3, b takes c3. The reason white took with the pawn here is that the pawn on d4 was an isolated pawn, so we usually want to have our pawns closer to the center in this case and also protect our central pawn. Black played knight e4, rook a e1, white doubled up the rooks here. As you can see in this position, white is slightly better. Why? Because if you compare the bishops, white's bishop is better than black's bishop. Black's bishop is blocked by his own pawns, and that's why white is slightly better in this position. So black played queen c7, white played c4. White is trying to open up the position and also get this passed pawn on d4. d takes c4, queen takes c4. Now you can see that white has this passed pawn, and if we can push the pawn, if white can push the pawn, white can get even more advantage here, but it's a little bit hard to push the pawn to d5 since black just moved the knight to d6, and now the queen is under attack. So queen c2, rook a c8, knight g4. Okay, knight g4 is a brilliant move. Mikhail Tal, even though it looks like this position, is not a tactical position, right? Everything is protected, the king is safe, black king is safe, there's no unprotected piece, there's no immediate weakness in black's position. But this is how Mikhail Tal found this move knight g4, because he was such a legend, and you know, his talent is so pure that he found out that the knight on f6 is gone. So the knight is on d6, not on f6, because notice that you usually, when you castle, you have this minor piece on f6 who is defending your king side and your castle. But here black pieces are kind of far from the king, and that's why the castle is more vulnerable. So by moving the knight to g4, white is preparing to sacrifice here. So let's see what happened. In the game, black made a mistake and black pushed the pawn to f5. So he didn't realize that white's attack is so crucial here. The best move here for black was to play rook fe8. But even after rook fe8, white could push the pawn to d5, and now black can't take the pawn on d5, because if black takes on d5, we can simply first take the queen, and after rook takes, we can take on e8, and we win a piece here. Notice that the rook on c8 is overloaded in this position. So that's why after pushing the pawn to d5, black should take the rook on e3, rook takes e3, knight takes e3, and now black can play bishop b5, and this position is playable for both sides. So here it's about equal, but white is slightly better because of this pawn on d5. Anyway, in the game, black played f5 in this position. So here, after f5, Mikhail Tal found a brilliant move in this position. I want you guys to pause the video and find the best move for white. Yes, the best move for white is knight takes h6, which is a brilliant move in this position. Although, even queen b3 check here is a good move as well, because if black moves the rook to f7 to block the queen, we have a beautiful move here, rook e7, and we can put pressure on the rook and the queen. And if the king moves to h8, then knight can move to e5, and we have this idea to move the knight to g6. But the move knight takes h6 is really nice sacrifice, which I think if you're playing, you know, against a human, this is probably the best move, although computer might think that queen b3 is also another good move in this position. So knight takes h6, black accepted the sacrifice, because notice that if, for example, black moves the king to h7, here white has different ways to continue. One of them is to play bishop e7 here, and if king takes h6, we have rook h3 here, and let's say if king g6, we can play queen d1, queen h5 is coming, and this is absolutely winning position. But also, instead of moving the rook to h3 here, we can even take the knight on d6, because notice that if the queen takes, we can play rook e6, and that's a fork. So in the game, black took the knight here on h6, and then white checked on g3, king h7. If the king goes to f7, white can checkmate the king in just 3 moves. White can move the queen to b3, and let's say knight c4, we take, bishop d5, we take, and this is a checkmate. Notice that the rook on e1 is covering the e file, the rook on g3 is covering the g file, and the bishop is covering the f6 square. So this is a checkmate. That's why in the game black played king h7, but let's say if the king goes to h8, here white can play rook e6. The idea is to put pressure on h6, and if the queen goes to h7, here white can simply take the knight on d6 and win the game. But in the game, black played king h7, White checked on e7. So this is a fork. We are attacking two pieces. Queen takes e7, bishop takes e7, rook e8. This is a tricky move. Here, white played queen e2 to protect the bishop. But notice that if you take the knight, black can win the game. Black has a checkmate here. Yes, back rank mate, right? So rook e1, and white's king is totally trapped, so the game is over. So we should not move our bishop on e7. We need to keep the bishop on e7. That's why in the game, Mikhail Tal played queen e2, which was the best move in this position. Okay, after queen e2, black played bishop e4 to open up the other rook and also to block the white queen. Here, instead of bishop e4, black could also play bishop b5, but white is still better in this position. White can play queen e1. Notice that the queen is covering c1 square, and rook c7. If the rook takes, we take the rook with check, so he doesn't have time to play rook c1 check, right? And if he goes rook c7 to put pressure on e7, we can play rook e3. The bishop is protected, and after rook c8, white can play f3, rook c1. Notice that there was no way we could save this square, rook c1, so we just give up our queen in order to get more material here with the bishop. So bishop takes d6, rook e1, and here white is better because white is up a pawn. Okay, so in the game, black played bishop e4, and white played bishop g5, which is another brilliant move in this position. Notice that if black takes the pawn on g5, white has a clear way to checkmate. White can check on h5. King, let's say, goes to g7. We check here again. King goes to f7. Check. King goes here. Queen e5. King d7. Rook g7. Let's say rook here. We can just take. And if the king goes here, we checkmate on c5, and if the king goes here, we checkmate here, and if the rook goes here, we just take, and again we have a checkmate. Beautiful checkmate, right? Okay, so let's go back. That's why after bishop f5, black can't take the bishop, but notice the bishop is also covering the square on c1, which is very, very important here because the last rank is weak and we need to do something about it. If we play something like h3, let's say, black could take our bishop. That's why with the last move here, white, not only he saved the bishop, but also he's controlling c1, which is very important. Okay, after bishop g5, black played bishop f3, which is a tricky move. Why? Because if the queen takes, black can checkmate the king again. You see that black is also playing tricky moves, so white needs to be really careful here. And of course, if white takes with the pawn or with the rook, the queen is under attack, so he can simply take the queen. So white played queen f1 to save the queen and also cover the first rank. Bishop e2, queen a1, another great move. And here he took the bishop. Rook takes g5, knight e4, rook takes f5. Instead of knight e4, let's say if black plays rook g8, we can simply take, and then we can play queen e1. And even though black has a bishop, knight, and the rook against the queen, but since we have these pawns on the king side, and also the black king is exposed, white has an advantage in this position. So in the game, after knight e4, black took the pawn on f5. Black played rook c2, queen b1, which is a great move in this position. Why? Because not only we are attacking the rook, but also we are putting our queen in front of the king. So there might be some kind of discovery checks in this position. And here black played knight d6, which was not a great move. The best move probably in this position was to play rook c7, but even after rook c7 we could play h4 and white's position is better. But after knight d6 in this position, white took the rook, and here actually black just resigned, because if the knight takes the rook, we can take with check, and if the king moves, let's say, to h8, white can simply push the pawn to h4. White is +4 here, the king is exposed, and the game is over. So it's a hopeless position for black. That's why black just resigned earlier after queen takes c2. So I hope you guys enjoyed this game, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and this way you will help me a lot to improve my channel and also to create better videos for you guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.